right, welcome back everyone to our next episode of the Tech Show, where my co-host Levi Lais and I talk about all things edge tech, metaverse, crypto, AI, you name it. Today is a really special day, and I'm super excited because we are going to hear about the story of none other than Levi Lais. So Levi, you were not always, ever since you were born, a tech person working in AR, VR. Tell us, what is your story? Like, how did you get into this space? How did you maybe tell us a little bit about how you transitioned from being, hourly worker, just like everyone else, to a business owner, successful business owner, I would say, with quite a number of ventures that you're working on. Yeah. What was the genesis of all that?
Yeah. So it started, I got married in '09, and we were basically just, I was a, sales guy, doing customer service stuff on the phones. And she was a center director at, a Jenny Craig, right? Like just hourly wage kind of jobs. And we were home for a while, and then decided to move from Portland to Denver just to get good at being
Mm-hmm.
married,
I'm so
and
glad you moved to Denver.
I know, because
That's where
that's
we
where we
met.
met. Yeah, we're both from the Northwest. You up in the
Yeah.
Seattle area. Well, I mean, you're from all over the planet, but yeah, kind of. You're
We'll call
right
it
now.
call it
You're in the
Seattle.
Seattle. Yeah, Seattle. And then I'm from we're from Portland. And so to, meet our Northwest, kindred spirits, while we were in Denver, that was a big part of it. And the other part of, our friendship really kicked off when we were both, had Google Voice numbers, and we're
Right.
both like using when it first came out. And,
Yelp.
we got really deep into the tech scene
Yep.
together, right? And so, anyways, Julie and I, we moved to Denver to kind of get good at being married and what have you. And we ended up, both working at a company called Home Advisor, and doing sales there. And it was enough to, get loans out on a couple of cars, take loans out, loan out on a house, got a couple dogs, kind of just living that dream, the American dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
And both of us were just kind of like, man, if this is it, like this is not what we want. Like this is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
It was what we desired. We wanted that, 9 to 5, working in the yard on the weekends. Like we both, wanted that at the beginning. And so anyways, long story short, we just weren't happy with that. And so we were like, you know what, let's let's figure out, what that next step might look like. And so I had been doing a little bit of reading.
Mm-hmm.
I read a book by Stephen Key called One Simple Idea. And, the key, pun intended, element was that, instead of trading your time for money, you would trade value for money. And I think we've talked about it a little bit on this podcast
Yeah,
before,
but
but just
why don't you
to,
expand on that just a little bit? What do you mean by time versus value for money?
yeah. So like, Home Advisor, for example, is uh, a great illustration. So you get paid to sit there on the phones and make phone calls, and then if you get a sale, right, you sign somebody up for the service, you get a commission, and your all of your money is basically tied to um, sitting there and being clocked in and putting in the time, right?
Yeah.
So even in commission based jobs, it's very tightly correlated to putting in the time.
Yeah.
And in my mind, it was like it was either a fixed hourly wage or an hourly plus commission wage. Like I just didn't have the trade value for money concept in my brain, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so in the book, he talks about patents, he talks about businesses, product ideas, etc. Um, and, uh, all the way down to like consultation and those types of things. But it's essentially, you know, somebody is willing to pay you for the value that you provide.
Mm.
And
Regardless of
time,
how long it took you.
exactly. And
Yeah.
time is like, to some extent, a value, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
time is
Mm-hmm.
more valuable than money. It's the only commodity that we, or resource that you can't get back, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it just sort of like unlocked this like other half of the planet for me,
Mm.
of like just how things function. And I started noticing like, oh, you know uh and I'm trying to figure out the best way to say it concisely, but essentially I just went deep into like the software, app ideas at the time. It was like 2010, 2011 or
Mm.
so. And so I was just like deep into like, learning about apps and learning about product design, learning about
Mm-hmm.
tooling for manufacturing, like
Mm-hmm.
really just consuming information to start trying to figure out how do you trade, like what is valuable? What do people want to just give you money for, whether your time's there or not? And like if you're putting all this equity time in, which is what we call it now, at the time I didn't really have a word for it, but it's like if I'm spending all this time working for nothing, is what it felt like.
Yeah.
What's that payoff look like?
Yeah. Yeah.
Trading value for money means that you had to go create that value, which takes time. And so in reality it means you're working for free until you
Yeah.
get that, after the fact compensation. And so yeah, one thing led to the other. And I read, so he talked about Timothy Ferriss. I think it was one of his students. And Timothy Ferriss wrote a book called The 4 Hour Work Week, and that was about efficiency and VAs. And I started to see like, oh wow, so like, he had this job where he was, 80 hours a week making, 30, I think it was like 80 grand a month or something. And he was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather make half that in 10% of the time,
Yeah.
5% of the time, and have all this other time to do all these other things with our lives. And I was like,
Yeah.
whoa. So that took the value for money idea and then started giving practical tools for the hyper efficiency model, and to be able to like produce value for less effort. And so then it was kind
Yeah.
of like, okay,
Yeah.
so if I'm pursuing these ideas, and I'm doing it efficiently, that's where you really start seeing the return on your investment, with the time. And so
Yeah.
from that, I went down a couple more book paths. App Empire, Think and Grow Rich. Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich is fantastic for sort of training your subconscious to look for things, without having to be.
So I have a question. So the 4 hour work week, one of the
Mhm.
one of the tools that is stressed in that book is like the concept of leverage, right? Like getting
Right.
other people to do work for you for a lot less. Was that 'cause I know in your journey, part of one thing you did was you created a few apps like Pickup Pal, right? And
Yep. Build a
Random
dis.
Ruby, Build a Disc, right? So was that in the 4 hour work week realm where you like hired somebody to do that for you, or was that pre Tim Ferriss?
So that was after, I think, right after App Empire and Think and Grow Rich. Um, we started, or it was before Think and Grow Rich actually, but after App Empire, I started really focusing in. You and I came up with some product ideas. The
Yeah,
overhead was just going to be too high, and
yeah.
like because it needed, $100 product needing $50,000 tooling. We were like, oh wow, okay, never
That was
mind.
the Actividesk, right? The
Actividesk, yeah. It's basically a TV dinner tray that you like lift it up and the legs spring
yeah,
out, and then you can like
yeah,
stand at your desk, right? And like that product came out like 2 or 3 years later, and
yeah,
so in hindsight, we probably could have had some success, but we didn't have the resources at the time.
yeah.
When you're trading value for money, like it takes money to make money, right? But like if you don't have money, then it just takes value, something that money would represent,
Yeah,
and so you have to be able to like create in order to be able to like
yeah.
have that value. And
Looking
so
back at that time, just really quick, I remember how I felt. like I felt like I didn't know what I didn't know, right? At least now I kind of
Mm-hmm.
feel like sometimes I know what I don't know, so to speak. It's like,
Right.
ooh, I don't know
Yeah.
that, but I know I'm supposed to know that, so I better go and research it. But at that time, it was like completely in the dark. I was like, whoa, like how do we even go about this? Who do we talk to? Where
Right.
do we start? And it was yeah, it's just man, I can't even fathom. But that's most people, right? You got to start somewhere,
Yeah.
and I think that's why your story is so inspiring. All right, so yeah,
Yeah,
go
you
ahead.
started taking patent classes, right, at School of
Yeah,
Mines,
yeah,
and I was diving deep into like the product design side of things, and
yeah,
we were throwing up spreadsheets and figuring out all the math and break even
yeah,
points. We were actually, took phone calls and in person meetings with manufacturers. Like we
yeah,
really started
yeah.
going down paths, but I feel like one of the things that everybody has like some natural gifting in different places. For some reason, one of my natural gifts is cutting it off when it's dead. Like if something's
Hmm.
not going to work,
That's not my
seeing it.
gift.
Right. um, your gift is making something work when it shouldn't, and somehow you made it work. But yeah, so like for me, it's like, we would go down this path and be like, that's not viable. Boom, next. That's not viable.
Hmm.
Boom, next. And so, yeah, started getting into software in 2012. I remember my boss at Home Advisor, Pete Farragon, uh, he was like, why don't you just, build your own app? Like learn how to program. And I was like, oh, weird. I guess I could, huh? I could make an iPhone app. There's no reason I couldn't. And so that's kind of
Because
what
up until then, you
led me
were
down that
hiring
path.
that out, right?
Even then I wasn't hiring it yet. I was just into
Mm,
apps. I was into tech, and he was like, "Why don't you learn how to
okay.
build them?" And it's like, again, it's like I'm 20 how old am I? 26, 27 at this point, and it just had never clicked that like I could just like go teach myself how to make an app, and so it was another one of those big aha moments. My 20s, man, I really, my mind is
Hmm.
just a completely different animal than it was before
Hmm.
my 20s. But yeah, so I ended up hiring out to a dev team in India using freelancer.com, using a lot of the tools that Timothy Ferriss put in his book. Um, Not really knowing what I didn't know, to your point, and ended up spending about 10 grand on the cheesiest, most horrible apps you could ever possibly make. Build a disk where you like put in like the gender and the topic, and then it like comes up with an insult, but like I went in and wrote all the insults myself. So there's no computational value whatsoever. There was nothing
AI before
generative. It
AI.
was, yeah, right. Levi I like it was just me coming up with stuff. And same thing for pickup lines, picking up this gender. This is the
Uh-huh.
topic. And then I had 100 or so pickup lines, and and it was actually it wasn't too crazy. I mean, I had like family, or I don't remember who it was, but I was a friend of somebody who went to the church of one of my friends in like Wisconsin. Told him, and he was like, "Whoa, that's your app? We love this app." So like in my head, I'm like, "Oh, okay, so it's getting a little
Yeah.
traction," but it was just the
Yeah.
cheesiest app. And I don't think I made it like $100 on that $10,000. It was like, this is not a good. So I was like, let me come up with like the app, like the one that's just
Uh-huh.
gonna blow everybody's minds, right? And so there was this
Hmm.
popular app. It was like a picture, like four pictures, and you have to come up with the common word. And so I was like, ooh, what about a common thread app where
Mm.
like somebody says something, another person says something else, and then random Ruby jumps in and says something seemingly random, and then you have to
Hmm.
use the tiles of available letters to come up with the word that
Yep.
matches the common thread. That didn't go
Yep.
well either. So that was like $2,500 for that one. I think I made it like a couple hundred at most on that. Not made, but like revenue. Like I lost thousands on that. So I'm probably 13 grand to 15 grand in the hole. And I'm like, I have to learn how to do this myself. right? And so
If
circling
nothing
back
else, to
to
save
Julie and
money, right?
yeah, like if it so this the yeah the, so 9 out of 10 startups fail, and so I said, well, if I have to do this 10 times, I need to do it myself. This is 2 out of the 10. Like I
So
have
you're.
7 more failures ahead of me.
I
I
love that
can't
mindset,
spend
by
that
the
much
way.
money. Yeah,
I feel like
I can't
anyone
spend
who's
that much
gonna
money on.
do entrepreneurship and business, like you almost have to have that mindset. It's like, all right, I have to fail 10 times before finding my one success. So you have to, like, it's painful, but you have to treat each one like it's gonna be a success. Otherwise, you won't give it its best, right? But it's almost like you have to go
Right,
into it with that mindset, which is so hard because people don't like failure, right? But it's such a
right.
crucial like ingredient to like the risk, right? It's such a crucial ingredient that you have to embrace it in order to move forward.
Yeah, when I first started learning how to program, my brain was not ready for the red error uh, uh, indicator every time. Failed, failed, build failed, you suck. Like it's like screaming at you with this red like error message. Like I was not ready for that. I'm a
Oh
different person
man.
now after that too. Oh man. But
Oh.
yeah, the failure, you start to really embrace the feedback. Like, oh, I need like, man, if I could get more details about what's wrong, I could actually fix it,
Hmm.
you know? And so there's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
mindset there. After I graduated high school, I moved to Hawaii for a little while. And one of the uncles in the church that I went to, I ended up interning at that church, and he took me and then the other young guys um, to coffee once a week. And this guy owned 2 companies. He was the top floor of like the business tower next to like the mall
Oh
on
wow.
Oahu. I mean, the dude was like
Okay.
really,
Oh man.
really successful. And like we got to like basically sit at his feet and learn. And I needed a job at the time, I think it was, and he was like, well, how many applications have you filled out? And I'm like, well, none yet, and I just hadn't like really done anything, but I was like, oh, I need it. Like, he basically just like called me out like hardcore,
Whoa. Whoa. I
you're
haven't heard this
lazy.
story
You
yet.
need to get off yeah, you're lazy.
Whoa.
He called me lazy. You got to get off your butt and get out there and pound the pavement and go, and I was like, oh,
Wow.
whoa, okay, and like I listened to his feedback, got into sales, and the rest was history. As far as my sales, the next 10 plus years was the fruit of that very hard to digest critical feedback that I received.
Yeah.
That was the first
Yeah.
time in my life somebody spoke to me that way, who I knew cared about me. And uh I don't know, that was the very first you know somebody who's like yelling at you about being lazy and saying get off your butt and go pound the pavement. Like, you don't feel like a success at that point, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that was my first
No.
build failed, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm 22, failure. No. It kind of set me down a path of like getting better at that. But then like once I hit programming, it was like that was when it really started to click, where it was like, I need feedback. I need like constructive feedback. I need indicators saying
Yeah.
things are going
Yeah.
wrong. And so I've learned to really embrace,
Yeah.
failure in business, failure in coding, failure in all of those things,
So
because
so on your timeline, you haven't yet
Mhm,
quit Home Advisor yet, but didn't you also
right.
try? Like I remember you actually try after you learned app development, and let me know if I'm wrong here. You actually like interviewed for an app development job at Home Advisor, right? Like you went down that you tried to go down that path as well,
Yeah,
and
kind
you
of.
got
So
pretty far, I think.
yeah, so I had built my apps. I had them to like show, this is what I designed the concepts, I design, but they
Yeah.
built it, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I got to like, it was me and one other person, but that other person was already in that department, and I was over in sales. And it was a
Mm,
QA job, so I
okay.
probably would have just been working in SQL and like data entry and testing things and breaking things. The junior dev role
Yeah.
without any experience
Foot in the
firsthand.
door.
I was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm QAing all my apps, like as I'm really, so I felt like I had a decent chance, and I did. I got to the end, and was one of two. Would have been a big pay raise, would have been really awesome to get into that space. But because I didn't, I had even more motivation to kind of break out of that.
Do you feel like you were, in a sense, you got lucky by not getting the job? Like maybe had you gotten that job, maybe the trajectory of your life would have been completely different.
Yes, I would say so. I think the that feeling of emptiness and like we've checked all these boxes and there's no boxes left to check, and this isn't awesome. This sucks. I don't know that it would have felt quite as dire had I started at that point down that
Yeah.
path. And so I think a big part of who I am is user interface and user experience design. I
Yeah.
have intuition in that space, and I mean, just in regular real life, I love aesthetics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm passionate about utility, and so to have those two come together is a that's my unique sauce, right? And so being a QA dev, if that was my entry point, I might not have enjoyed it too.
Mm.
Whereas when I dove in, so let's just kind of do some quick fast forwarding. Uh, we sold everything and moved to Thailand. So we put
Yeah.
everything in
Big
a
jump,
storage
big
unit back
risk
home.
in a sense, right?
Big jump.
Like,
Yeah. So Julie and I both, like, I was like, I'm going to learn how to build my own apps. And she's like, I'm going to become a real estate broker because Lisa Yoshimura
wow.
was the best realtor in the history of the world. And there needs to be more people like her. And so Julie's goal was to be Lisa Yoshimura. My goal was to be a developer, software developer. And so we sold everything we owned. We drove it up to Portland, put it in a storage unit, and then moved to Thailand for 3 months.
Was it scary
And
or exciting or what? Like, what was the emotion of taking that leap? Like, that seems like not a leap that, like, that's a leap anyone or a lot of people could do, but a lot of people
mhm,
don't do it even though they want to. Like, I remember my neighbor, right, when I sold my house after I got laid off, and told him I was gonna try and start my own business. He was like, "Ooh, I could do that right now, but I'm too afraid." And like, I've been wanting to do it for 10 years, but I just can't. Like, I can't muster up the guts to take on that risk and do that. But you guys did it. So like, what? Tell me about your emotions. Like, what was going on through your mind?
So I put a lot of time, effort, energy, study, research into the path. And our goal was Julie would be the working income for with real estate, and I would do the big swings with software. Like I said,
Mm,
seven more attempts to
yeah,
or eight more attempts, and we'll hit
yeah,
one. And we were on the same page. Julie and I were in sync on that. We took the Dave Ramsey course, got out of like 25,000 or so in high interest debt, so we were debt free. We took Lisa's advice and did a bunch of fixes around the house that cost like 10 grand. And all in, I think we were like 170, and we ended up selling it for like 260 something. So it was the first time we
woo!
first time we ever saw six figures in the bank. We were like, whoa, this is, so
I
it
mean,
wasn't
that in
as,
itself is a huge win, right? For
yeah,
your age, and like for a lot of people that'd be winning the lottery. So in the sense, like, you guys kind of won the lottery, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah. We bought in 2010. We didn't know it was the absolute bottom. And so by 2014, when we were selling, it was like, most of what happened was the market. I mean, we took out walls and fixed stuff
Yeah.
up, put in box. I mean, we really, redid the ports. Like we did all kinds of stuff to make it
But you
better.
also, I think, you also chose that house because you already knew it was under market value. So there was a lot of
Yes.
intentionality behind that as well, right?
Yep.
So that's
Yep.
also
And
key.
it was zoned R2, so it had like duplex zoning, and it was kind of a duplex, but it lived as one house. And so it had all the boxes of like, except for the move in ready, we had to clean it up a bit, to before we moved into it. But
Great, great.
that
I'd say
moment
that's a
wasn't
good
as scary.
Yeah, so that's a good lesson, I think, for me and
Hmm.
also anyone watching is like reduce your risk by like planning, right? Planning
Right,
ahead and forging a path. And sometimes the your plans, your actual path might not go according to plan, but if you have a plan, if nothing else, it gives you the guts and the confidence to move forward, right?
right.
Uh, where versus being paralyzed in fear and doubt, right?
Yeah.
So I
And
think that's great.
I'm working really hard on my anxiety, but I will say, I don't know if we want to call it maybe like eustress instead of distress, right? Like the healthy version of stress. I always I have contingency after contingency after contingency. Like I feel like part of what I do is I look ahead and I see all of the ways a thing could go, and as long as like 95% of those paths are break even or better, and the high end is worth it, and the low end is very unlikely. It's like, so I kind of get a feel for the plausible outcomes, and then we make these moves based on those potential outcomes. And so we did all the math on real estate, and it was like she only has to sell X number. We're in marketing. We've been doing, Home Advisor sells marketing to contractors. So we know how their businesses work. We know how contracting works. We know how to register for an LLC and all these different things that were required for contractors to join Home Advisor. We were basically business consultants without owning a business. And so we were like, we can totally just, like, we know how leads work. We know how, you buy 100 for $5,000, and then you have like 10 appointments, and then you have like four people say yes, and then you end up getting paid by two people, and that's 20 grand. So you got 4x on your marketing dollars. And
Yeah.
so you factor in your costs and you factor in your marketing, and you have 30% margins. And now, how much money do you want to make? Because all you got to do is plug that many leads in and you're good to go. And like anybody that followed our instructions were having amazing success. And we're like, this is just like a no-brainer formula. Like, why aren't people doing this?
Uh-huh.
And so I learned software design, started getting into coding. I was learning Objective C, and Swift came out while we were in Thailand. And so I was like, oh, maybe Objective C is not it. Maybe I need to wait, and do Swift, or, it was a tough time to figure that out. And because everything was getting deprecated and all of the tutorials were just kind of a hodgepodge, like I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know anything about programming. And so learning that specific language at that point was really hard. But I came across a guy named Meng Tu, and he was writing a book called Design Plus Code. And the first chapter I think was done, and he like was crowdsourcing this book slash online course hybrid thing. And so I pre-ordered it and started in, and just he was doing all of his design work with Sketch by Bohemian Coding, and I fell in love with that process. It was like, I'm like,
Mm,
this is me. I can do this. This
wow.
is so straightforward. And so I really heavily leaned into the design part of it.
Yeah.
And I was helping my buddy Robert out with a company that he was founding, just more as like ideas and consulting, and like all the books I'd been reading. Like I had a lot of information, so I was just like helping as best I could. And I ended up say, hey, like I'll do your design kind of stuff. And so he brought me in, and I did the design work for his company. And that developer that I worked with ended up referring me to one of his other clients, and they were like, how much do you want? And I'm like, and I just made up a number, $35 per hour. They're like, yeah, okay. I didn't realize it was so cheap. you know at the time I was like, wait, I mean 50. Oh man. So that was another big lesson, was like,
Yeah.
value yourself even if you don't know what you're worth, I guess. But that ended up being my first paid gig. And that was about 6 months or so into it, maybe even a year into. So I was just doing
That's
my own stuff
incredible.
and doing
So
stuff for
you
free.
learned. So you basically learned from like from zero, learned something, and then you put yourself out there for free, and
Hmm.
then the networking started to happen, then you got a paid gig, right?
Yeah.
I feel like
Yep.
that's also so important, right? The Because a lot of people, they want to like, well, how do I get this job, or like how do I like get into tech or get into the industry? And I think that other than the traditional pathway of like going to college, getting a degree, and getting a job, like if you want to do the self learn route, you almost have to go through this initiation where you put yourself out there, right? Like,
Right.
show people what your value is. And there is definitely enough demand out there that you'll be picked up, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you have to kind of first, it's an investment, right? Yeah.
Right.
Do something for free or get yourself out there, work with a team, and then yeah, the demand will follow after that if you're good, right?
Right. Yeah, and so I think if you're good is so highly contingent on if what you provide is of value. That's
Yeah.
really what it means.
Yeah.
And so it's like you can take a long time and
Yeah.
do it right, and you're not making much per hour, but you're doing a good job, and you're building systems that will help you be more efficient later, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like it's being willing to live. I mean, we lived with her parents for a year after we got back. I turned 30 in Thailand, so moving back in with her parents was very tough at that age.
Mm,
With
yeah.
we owned a house and sold it, and now we're living with her parents.
But it was very
Um,
intentional on your part,
yeah, we
right?
had six figures in the bank, right? But it was
Yeah.
like we need that money. By that point, we probably had like 30,000 left in the bank, and we were so I was going to be she was going to be the working income, and I was going to be the big swings.
Yeah.
Well, we got back, she got her license because she took all the courses online in Thailand. I took all my courses online in Thailand. So we came back, and I was going to um, get a short-term job to pay the immediate bills while we built her real estate business, and then once that was ready, that would
Yeah.
become the working. So I was actually going to be working income first, phase one of this
Mhm.
thing. Phase one
Mhm.
was learning, phase two was me supporting her
Yeah.
getting real estate off the ground, and then phase three was her supporting me on big swings. And so
Yeah.
one thing led to the other. She started her business, and we had no idea the complexity of running an entire company as one person, you know?
Uh-huh.
So, like, the number of hats, it was like marketing, sales, lead generation,
Oh
technical
man.
skills, showing
Your
houses,
first
listing,
first
like,
toe into running a true business, right?
yeah. And we were like, this is nuts. And
Yeah.
so, we ended up saying, okay, so I could do this other job, and like we could be making a little bit, and Julie would just kind of limp along by herself, and we would just hope that it would click. Um, or I could quit that job. We could take another 10 grand of that money that was earmarked for longevity, right? That was our
Yeah.
cliff was out a couple months because of that. And we cram that up front, buy the
Wow.
leads because we know
Wow.
how to convert leads. And then from there, like both of us would work on real estate until it was ready to go. And so then within 6 months, she was a six-figure real estate
Wow. That's
agent.
incredible.
And yeah,
You beat the odds. You beat the
we
odds, right?
yeah, and well, and again, because we knew the formula. Like
Yeah.
there's like you have to also be good at what you do, but that's not the part that all you have to do is care, like, and
Yeah.
be willing to learn, and you'll be good at what you do.
Yeah.
And so we just got really good at learning. I started diving deep into working on the business while she dove deep into working in the business. It allowed her to generate really good relationships that we've kept to this day,
Yeah.
9 years
So for
later.
those that don't know, can you like in 30 seconds describe on the business versus in the business?
Yeah, so on the business would be like the name, the Secretary of State filings, the uh lead generation tools, the CRM, managing all of your potential customers, and data entry, and business strategy, like what should our budget be, what should the ROI be, the return on investment be. These are the I built systems to track, these are the Zillow leads, these are the referral leads, these are the Google AdWords leads, and like just started like mapping out the ROI on them and cutting stuff that wasn't profitable and focusing in on the things that were, and sort of generating the on the business is like generating the systems and those types of things. Whereas working in the business is like being really good at real estate, knowing the market, being able to talk to clients, coaching them, helping them figure like weeding for them. I mean, we were pruning rose bushes in people's, at people's listings to get it ready for picture day. And,
Yeah.
so working in the business is more like you have to do both as an entrepreneur. And so a lot of people want to start their own company because they're really good at working in the business, but they just they
Yeah.
don't know what they don't know as far as working on the business is concerned.
Yeah. So
And so
crucial.
because both of us were all in on it, it was
Yeah.
able to like flourish and
Wow.
thrive. And there was a point where I started to, so I got a couple paid gigs, and then uh, your story and mine, have been converged in this narrative for probably 5 or 6 years already at this point. But then we really hit our stride when you started getting projects from this YouTube channel. And I was like, I've got to learn Unity, and so when Maverick was born in 17, 18, oh my gosh, 2017, I think it is. Oh man, I'm dead. No. uh, I think it's 2017. He's 5. I know that. Turned 6 in September. Uh, but yeah, so when he was born, I was like, I've got to teach myself how to code. So I learned Swift. I rebuilt some apps. I started getting really, really familiar with programming and the C-based languages.
So before this, you were heavier on the design side, but now you're
Yep.
starting to shift more towards the coding side.
Right. And it was very light. Like I was really heavily helping her as her unlicensed admin for real estate. But then because gigs kind of started popping up and I was like, I really need to learn how to program. Like we're now ready for the big swings. We're making 6 figures with this. We can do our big swings now. Right. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that staggered approach, it took from 2015 to 2017 before I was actually able to start really diving deeper
Wow.
into
Wow.
skill development. And then I was able to learn Swift relatively swiftly. And then when you had projects pop up with Unity, I was like, I got to learn Unity. Like this is where it's at. Like we did it. We got to the edge of tech. Like let's now sprint off into the abyss together. And so uh, we were using a lot of our experience with the real estate stuff, and in terms of like how we were trying to manage clients and things, and we were, developing our skills in terms of coding, and we were learning how to like, train people and hire people and do all these things, and yeah, so that was 2018, and then we started doing Microsoft projects, Halliburton projects, Johnson and
Yep.
Johnson projects, like
Yep.
just big projects that were really, we didn't have to fake it anymore. And so
Hmm.
then,
Hmm.
it got to the point where we started, and this is probably a good place to transition, and maybe, next week or something, go into this part of it. But like, that was essentially where I got into tech and how my path into tech. But then, like, once we were both in Unity and both going, and I stored AppVolx. I had shut it down when the apps failed, but I kind of like restarted AppVolx, and you got Ong Innovations kind of, formalized. And then we were really like, we were budding agencies at that point,
Yeah.
getting deeper into agency work. And then we started to really understand the difference between trading time for money and trading value for money, and we found ourselves slipping back into sort of a time for money scenario. And so that's when I think we really started pursuing some of our, what I would call, equity time projects.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is Levi's origin story, right? But maybe
Yeah.
our
I
next
love it. I
maybe our
love it.
next pod can be centered around equity time versus
Yeah.
paid time, because
I
I think
think I
that's
think there could
really
easily be
the
a whole podcast on that topic, and it's so important, so important. And I do think I would love to, in all of our tech and edge tech discussions, I would love to make sure that we sprinkle a lot of these business topics in, because I think they are very relevant, not only to a lot of our viewers, but I think it's kind of part of the industry, right? You gotta also be business savvy, and having some of these raw, like on the ground, like these are not academic. You don't read these in school textbooks, but these are like the raw, on the ground. I remember, I took a lot of business classes when I did my master's degree, not only the patent classes, but a lot of business classes as well. And I remember they always felt like so theoretical and so like it didn't feel like they were actually helpful or useful, except whenever the professors would invite like actual business people in who ran successful companies to share their stories. It was almost like drinking from like the fountain of youth, right? I was like, oh, like, and
yeah,
nothing that they said ever matched the textbooks, but it made so much sense. I'm like, and I would
right.
ask the questions and they would answer it and be like, this is real, like this makes sense. And I don't know why like textbook business is there's such a discrepancy, but no, this
Yeah,
is real and raw right here. So
absolutely. Yeah.
so this is great. All
Yeah,
right,
it's a
cool.
roller
Well,
coaster. It's a roller coaster, but it's worth it. I mean,
yeah,
you sit there chained to your desk on your phone, just like, and you're
yeah,
like, man, I bet that grass is green. Look how green that grass is over there. Then you get
yeah.
over there and you're like, oh my, this is way greener. I had no idea it was this green over here.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's true. There's a lot of pain and sacrifice, like you said, but it's well worth it, in my opinion. Well worth it. All right, so it looks like we're about at the end of our time. I think what we're gonna do next week. Don't hold me to it, but I think we are going to do a little bit of a rumor roundup for the upcoming Apple headset, which is expected to be released in 2 weeks at WWDC. So, of course, Apple has not confirmed that. It's all speculation at this point, but all of the major news outlets, CNN, Forbes, Business Insider, even some of my friends who's worked at Apple, like almost everyone is expecting this to happen. So I'm pretty confident. So we'll do kind of like a rumor roundup next week. Maybe talk about some other topics as well. There's been a lot of AI news that's come out that we haven't even touched on.
Yeah.
And then we'll try and do the following week either a reactions video live, or like a recorded, like post WWDC reactions video that's edited. So yeah, thank you so much, Levi. This was fascinating. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, and I love your story. And you only probably covered like 5% of it, and there was so much more that I'm like, oh, you should talk about this and that. But we'll spread it out over the next few months, right, as we talk
Yeah.
about different parts of our story. So yeah,
That
thank you
sounds good.
everyone for joining us today. Be sure to comment down below if you have any questions for Levi. He'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you. So be sure to comment down below, like, share to your friends, subscribe, and we'll catch you all next week. Thank you.